Cantu Porto by the Prowler. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 1. Cargo and scientific supplies securely stored away in the cargo hold of the Neptune's library, a scientific and research vessel, which happens to be the very finest in the Queen's Navy. We left port around 9:30 in the a.m., August 13th, year of our Lord, 1888. We set sail on a scientific expedition bound for the Isle of Cantu Porto, a small island off the coast of Costa Rica. From my understanding, when we arrive, we will be the first foreigners to step foot on the island. Having never been explored, I am very excited, but at the same time, not being ashamed to admit, very nervous. This is my first captaincy, and I feel obligated to perform to the best of my abilities, and prove my superiors correct in putting their faith in me and trust for such an important expedition. I am tasked with leading a seaworthy crew of 120, plus a group of 4 of the country's leading scientists, and a detachment of Marines to explore the mysterious island of Cantu Porto. The crew looks able of their tasks and willing to do them. Those are my first impressions, anyway. The officers under me, for the most part, seem capable and knowledgeable of their duties, with the exception of 2 young lieutenants who were forced upon me through nepotistic connections. It's not ideal, but it's nothing I can't handle. The first day has been a success, and as I head for bed, I am filled with hope and excitement for what this expedition will bring. Here's hoping for success. Ezekiel Hampton, Captain of Neptune's Library, signing out. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 2, August 15th. Nothing of note since my last entry 2 days ago. The men's spirits are high, and the camaraderie is growing between the crew. A few disciplinary incidents cropped up, but nothing serious. We are on a schedule, and the expedition is going according to plan. Side note, one of the young lieutenants, a Mr. Theodore Radsford, might need some looking out for. He seems a superstitious and incapable fellow. 2 things that could bring disaster to a voyage and crew. I'll put one of the senior officers in charge of the situation. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 3, August 17th. Nothing of note happened yesterday, but today the young Lieutenant Radsford was caught spreading rumors amongst the men that this expedition was cursed. I don't think it worked. We're too early into the voyage, and there's been no signs of this expedition being cursed. I'll have the officers keep an eye on the men in the meantime, but everything seems fine. Mr. Radsford has been relieved of his duties and confined to his quarters until we return to port. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 4, August 18th. Sat down with the lead scientist of the expedition, a Professor Reginald Bartholomew, a truly brilliant man, the top researcher in the entire country, and after a brief conversation with him, I can see why. I sat down with him because I wanted to specifically find out what exactly it was we were to research on the island. He responded, everything. The entire documentation of the island was to be recorded. Plants, rocks, sand, soil, trees, and any living organisms that we come across was to be sampled. Then after the scientific findings were collected, we are to leave a small base camp with 2 of the scientists, a handful of Marines, and a year's worth of supplies to plant our country's flag and take control of the island until we return with more men and supplies. Professor Bartholomew then proceeded to tell me If we find the things he thinks we'll find on the island, then we'll return home as heroes and become famous men for the things we discover. I quickly pointed out that's all well and good, but I'm not in it for fame. I serve only Queen and country. That's where my loyalty ends. I wished the professor a pleasant evening and went to bed. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 5, August 20th. A panic among the crew has broken out. Bosun's mate Devers was found hanging from the crow's nest with a sign hanging around his neck that read, "Return home. The ship and voyage is cursed. Turn around now before it is too late." An investigation has taken place for this ghastly crime. I put the sergeant of arms, a grizzled veteran by the name of William Smythe, in charge, though I have my suspicions of who carried out this egregious act. My suspicions were proven correct when I sent the sergeant of arms and 2 other officers down to check on the young disgraced Lieutenant Radsford in his quarters. But when they called on him, he was not there. The lock was broken and the door was left ajar. There's no sign of the young Mr. Radsford, but we must find him before he sets the crew off into hysterics. Wish us luck, for I fear the future of our voyage depends on finding him. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 6, August 21st. Sadly, I must report another death. The sergeant-at-arms was found dead in his bed, his throat slit from ear to ear, with a message above his head, written in blood, to beware. Return at all costs. The officers are reporting whispers from the men in their sections that the ship is cursed. This must be stopped quickly before the ship is thrown into chaos. There's only so many places Radsford could be hiding. He must be found and quartered before it's too late. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 7, August 23rd. The past 2 days, me and my officers partook in a painstakingly desperate search for the mad disgraced Lieutenant Radsford. But I am happy to report he was found by young Master Jacobs, a fine lad. Reminder to put in recommendations for a promotion. The crazed Radsford was found in the corner of the bowels of the ship, feasting on rat carcasses, and surrounded by pieces of flesh of his victims. Was he also feasting on his victims as well? I shudder to think of such depravity. His body is also completely covered in carvings of his flesh that read, "Cursed, Doomed, Turn Back," and warning. Truly a disturbed individual. Does he suffer from scurvy? Or was he simply mad before stepping foot on this vessel? Whatever the case, he will face trial tomorrow, out on the upper deck for his crimes. He will be made an example of. We can't afford any more setbacks on this important expedition. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 8, August 24th. The trial of Lieutenant Theodore Radsford commenced, and he was sentenced to death for his crimes by his peers, and I carried out the sentence. He was hanged from the main mast of the ship, 9 o'clock, the morning of August 24th, in the year of our Lord, 1888. I pray after this we can put this craziness behind us and get back on schedule. I just hope the crew has not been lost. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 9, September 18th. Apologies for not keeping a consistent update to this journal, but it has been quite the task to keep the crew together. Last night, a mutiny of sorts was squashed by my master of the boat, Jedediah Hollingsworth. He and a few of the Marines were making their nightly patrols and came across a small group of crazed men trying to overtake the ship. These turncoats were foaming at the mouth, talking of a curse. Disciples of the mad Rasford, no doubt. They were quickly gagged and will be put on trial later on today. It will be swift. Their fates are sealed. Mutineers hang in the Queen's Navy. On a personal note, it's my birthday today. Waking up and hearing of a mutiny wasn't the greatest of gifts. So many setbacks have befelled this expedition. Will I live to see another birthday? I hope so. I'll try and keep a more consistent entry to my journals. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 10, October 13th. It has been over a month since my last entry. I would apologize, but there have been reasons for my absence. Keeping the crew together has been a difficult task. Multiple mutinies have transpired since my last entry. From more of the cursed believers to a band of men who were ex-privateers, not content because there was no loot to be held at the end of this voyage. And that's what happens when you fill the ranks of your navy with ex-pirates. Reminder to formally complain to my superiors when we return to port. I know my journal entry of this voyage has not been consistently updated, but Professor Bartholomew has been keeping an updated one of his own, so no fear. Hopefully there are no more setbacks. I believe if everything goes smoothly from here on out, we will reach the Isle of Cantu Porto within a month. Tomorrow is All Hallows Eve. Wish us luck on the night where the dead supposedly return to the living. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 11, November 21st. Joyous news. I was awoken at dawn from shouts on deck of land. I jumped out of bed and ran out on deck. I could hear shouts from the crow's nest of "Land ho!" I retrieved my binoculars from the casing and spotted the white sandy beaches of Cantu Porto. Finally, I exclaimed to myself, sighing a deep breath of relief. We've finally made it. It was a grueling journey, but we're finally here. Updated numbers: 100 crew members, 4 scientists, and a detachment of 50 naval marines. Supplies are still well stocked, and the remaining men's spirits have been lifted since seeing the land. Myself and my fellow officers are to meet with Professor Bartholomew and his team of scientists and put together an expedition party to search for the island in the morning. Things are finally starting to look up. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 12, November 22nd. History was made this morning. As we came to shore and stepped foot on land, we became the first foreigners to arrive on the island in its history. I personally planted our country's flag, declaring it part of the empire. What a moment. We then set up a base camp a few feet inland from the beach, then accompanied the science team on their search for new specimens. I'd say the first day was a success. Countless new species of plants and minerals were discovered, not to mention many exotic animals that the civilized world had never encountered before was found. Professor Bartholomew was very pleased with the findings, so I'm very pleased as well. Mark the first day off as a success. The expedition may go flawlessly after all. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 13, November 23rd. An interesting turn of events transpired today. While the second day of the scientific documentation was taking place, one of the scientists, a man by the name of Timothy Scott, and his marine escort came across a native. It was shocking at first, because we didn't come across any signs of human life the previous day. The native was skittish at first, but after a while, a form of communication was developed, and he took us back to his tribe. When we arrived, we met the tribal elders and chief. The people seemed warm and friendly, somewhat intelligent, but what can you expect from people without the teaching of a modernized world. Communication has been difficult, but Professor Bartholomew and his team have figured out a way they believe is working to communicate. Let's hope they are correct. Before leaving, we decide to leave Professor Bartholomew and his team, along with a few Marines, to stay at the village, to develop a rapport with the villagers. The villagers seemed eager and willing at the idea as well. I'm sure they're just as interested in us as we are of them. I told Professor Bartholomew to reach out as much as he could about the tribe and try to get the confidence of the chief. These are exciting times we find ourselves in. I can't wait till tomorrow. Captain's Log, Journal Entry 14, November 25th. All hope is lost. This will be my last entry into this journal. As dawn approached, myself and a contingent of men embarked back to the village, filled with eagerness to hear of the goings-on in the village from Professor Bartholomew and his team, hoping for continued success in the relationship of our peoples. As the sun rose and we entered the village, we were greeted warmly by the chief and the villagers, but I did not see the research team, no sign of Professor Bartholomew or his men. I communicated to the chief, trying to find the whereabouts of the team. He began to laugh, then in a broken form of English, said, Bartholomew, and motioned to me to step forward. I walked a few paces forward to a simmering cauldron. A couple of older tribe women were stirring what looked like boiling meat and some kind of fruits or vegetables. After a few stirs, a head turned over, and as it did, the chief once again said, Bartholomew, then laughed, and I pointed. It was the professor. His hair and most of his flesh were boiled off. I stood in complete shock. None of my men could see what was transpiring over my shoulder. I tried to give the orders to arms, but the words wouldn't come out. By the time I shook the fear and gave the order to attack, my men were surrounded and engulfed. I managed to run through the chief with my saber and run back towards the base camp on shore. The tribe was obviously working on a plan of attack throughout the night, because as I approached base camp, shouting to prepare for attack, I saw in horror my men being overrun and massacred by a contingent of tribal warriors. I barely escaped with my life and made it to the lifeboat. I rowed back to the ship and alerted the remaining men on board. To my surprise, a group of men just stood in place and gave up, awaiting their carnivorous fate, while others shouted, cursed, and jumped off the side of the ship and fled. There I stood, with 50 of Her Majesty's finest men ready to fight for our very existence. In the distance we could see large bonfires being lit on the beach, the cries of our fellow men ringing out as they were being cooked alive, frightening echoes in the tropical air as we readied for the boarding party of cannibalistic tribal warriors. We mowed down wave after wave of the cannibal tribesmen as they scaled over the railing, but in the end we were outnumbered. Myself and 3 Marines were all that were left. When the last of the Marines fell, I managed to slice my way through a few of the warriors and barricaded myself in my captain's quarters. I can hear my men outside the doors being eaten alive. Their cries of agony are hard to listen to. I just remembered what day it is, November the 25th. Now, we don't celebrate the day, but I know our allies in the colonies celebrate a holiday called Thanksgiving. The irony and humor did not escape me, even in this moment. There's not much time left. It won't be long now. They're breaking down the doors to my cabin as I write this. To my family, I love you more than words can express. I hope this letter finds you well. Please remember me in happier times. To my superiors, I tried my best. They're almost in now. As the saying goes, a good captain always goes down with the ship. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdark_n2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.